So I'd look up something else that I was thinking. Oh, that checks out. So I thought I'd just kind of hop in and read my piece because I'm learning too. You know what I mean? I listen to people talk. I listen to informed people talk. I listen to uninformed people talk. And that makes me want to know what else is being said. So what I did is clackety clackety, I looked stuff up. And the more stuff that I looked up, the more boop, 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 pieces started to come together. Ooh, 2 o'clock. When those pieces started to come together, I started to see other pieces. And it was epiphany after epiphany. So I'm gonna jump over to my piece and I'm gonna start reading it. Because why not? What you gonna do about it? I'm the live. You can watch or not. I keep looking at my face as if that's your face because I like addressing an individual, I guess. The United States is not conducting its own foreign policy. It's providing the stage on which two other nations' ambitions are being fulfilled by two men who were never ours to begin with. The pattern spans two Trump administrations, a covert intelligence catastrophe, two active wars, a decade-deep financial entanglement between Russian oligarchic power and the Israeli state, and a network of foreign loyalties that have never been adequately scrutinized. The time has come to name it plainly before more Americans die for interests that were never their own. I'm just going to go over because I want to show this picture of, that's my little picture of Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. With this piece, I went in the style of hastily drawn marker. You see them? Yeah, those dudes. Those ones right there. You know, my original idea was Goodfellas. Like I think about the movie Goodfellas, how you know, the two dudes were paired together because the boss wanted them working together. And that's the way I see these two dudes. As a matter of fact, the punchline, and I'll get back into my piece. The punchline of my piece is a joke that I never told. The name of my piece is A Fact Pattern Emerges. My subtitle is One is Going East and the other one is going west. So what? In the movie Goodfellas, they go and they visit Tommy's mom. Tommy's mom shows them a painting that she painted with two dogs. And that's actually Tommy's mom's line. One is going east and the other one is going west. So what? I thought that was hilarious. I giggled like a child when I made that my subtitle because there is no Goodfellas reference in any other part of my page other than what I had in my head literally when I wrote the title. So I'm going to come back so I can read this joint and y'all can look at me. Greetings. Greetings, greetings. So going back into my piece, the architecture of capture. Two men, two masters, one country sold. Two private citizens, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, have assumed effective control of America's most consequential diplomatic negotiations in Gaza, Iran, Ukraine, and the future of the Middle East. Neither holds a Senate-confirmed position. Neither is subject to meaningful congressional oversight. Neither is accountable to the American people in any formal sense. Their loyalties are not mysterious. They are documented, traceable, and structured. Jared Kushner is the ideological operator. His loyalty to Greater Israel and to Benjamin Netanyahu personally is not transactional. It's lifelong, religious, and familial. He did not learn to support the project of Israeli expansion. He was raised inside it. Steve Witkoff is the monetary operator. His loyalty to Russia is not ideological. He holds no discernible beliefs about Russian civilization or Kremlin geopolitics. What he holds is money. 3 decades of real estate fortune structurally enmeshed with the post-Soviet oligarchic networks that constitute Putin's financial power. He follows the money leads to Moscow. Together, they form a complete architecture of foreign capture, one serving the Zionist project of Greater Israel, one serving the oligarchic monetary power of Putin's Russia. These interests do not conflict with each other in the short term. They divide the world between them, and the United States funds both arrangements with its treasury, its military, and its debt. Netanyahu gets Gaza, the West Bank, as we know now, moving into Lebanon. They get the strategic architecture of Greater Israel. Putin gets Ukraine, sanctions relief, Western fracture, and intelligence cover to arm Iran against American forces. We aren't with Israel attacking Iran, America, Israel, Iran. We're doing it because Putin gave Trump the okay to do it. Why? Because the best way to kill Americans is in their own theater of war that Putin is not involved in. The United States is not at the table. The United States is the table. The deep roots, Russia and Israel, muscle, and the cardiovascular system, a union built over half a century. To understand how two American envoys came to serve foreign masters simultaneously, you must first understand that the relationship between Russian power and the Israeli state is not recent. It was not built by Kushner or Witkoff. It was built across 50 years of human migration, financial integration, and covert diplomacy. And by the time these two men arrived on the scene, it was already structural. Israel and Russia are tied together like a muscle and a cardiovascular system. One provides the physical force, the other the lifeblood that sustains it. The migration began in earnest in the 1970s when the Soviet government gave special permission to Jewish refuseniks to emigrate after decades of official persecution. Ooh, a door. Hello. Hi. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum. Hey, y'all still here? Okay, like I said, I had to break out. Mail guy came. That's the fun about being live, seeing real people doing human things. So y'all still listening? That's the facts. Well, no. It's not that Trump is too dumb to see. Trump is the Truman Show. Trump is the Truman Show. We don't have Witkoff and Jared who are ambassadors of the United States. We have an ambassador of Russia, an ambassador of Greater Israel, who are making American policy. Let me get into it. The second wave, you know what? Let me jump back. More than 150,000 arrived in the first wave alone. They were motivated by Zionist conviction and the promise of a Jewish homeland after generations of Soviet anti-Semitism. These were idealists, people who had fought for the right to leave, who had arrived in Israel with their identities intact and their commitment to the state unquestioned. The second wave was different, and it changed everything. Following the Soviet collapse of 1991, Nearly 1 million more Soviet Jews and their relatives poured into Israel under the law of return. This time, the motivating force was not ideology, but desperation. There was economic collapse, there was political chaos, and the sudden availability of an exit. They ran. Israel's population grew nearly 20% in a single decade. Critically, the money followed the people. So be aware. Russian culture, Russian money left Russia and funneled into Israel. All that trauma comes too. The oligarchs arrive. By the early 1990s, 6 out of 7 of Russia's richest tycoons were Jewish or part Jewish. This was not coincidence, because Jews had been systematically excluded from the centers of Communist Party power for decades. They had instead developed their skills and networks on the unofficial peripheral market in oil and gas, in finance, in the informal economy that operated beneath the Soviet surface. They got in where they fit in. When the state collapsed and its assets were suddenly available for acquisition, these men were uniquely positioned to move. The oligarchs were born. More than 30 Russian-Israeli tycoons eventually established themselves in Israel, some fleeing fallouts with Putin that put them at risk of imprisonment, others remaining closer to the Kremlin and seeking the strategic advantages of an Israeli passport, visa-free travel to the European Union, tax breaks for new immigrants, and strong protection against extradition. For those who needed both proximity to Putin and an exit door, Israel was the perfect arrangement. The result was a state that became simultaneously a sanctuary for oligarchs fleeing Russian power and a strategic platform for oligarchs serving it. As one Israeli commentator observed, Israel accepted so much money from these figures that the nation had become seriously ethically compromised. The people who founded the state, he wrote, would be turning in their graves. Ehud Barak, the human bridge. The most documented expression of this decades-deep entanglement is former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, soldier, intelligence director, defense minister, and prime minister who in the years after leaving government became a living illustration of how completely the muscle and the cardiovascular system had fused. On his last day of service as Israel's defense minister in March 2013, Barak's brother-in-law sent an email to the director of Columbus Nova, the American-facing investment vehicle of sanctioned Russian billionaire Viktor Vekselberg, a man the United States government describes as having close ties to the Kremlin. Within days, Barak had incorporated a private consulting company in Israel. Within weeks, he was meeting Vekselberg in New York. Within months, he had flown to Moscow under the alias Mr. Bondovsky, checked into room 644 of the Kempinski Hotel, executed a consulting agreement with Vekselberg's Renova Group, and received a wire transfer of $1 million to his Israeli account. His intermediary throughout was Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex trafficker and alleged intelligence asset who served Barak as fixer, financial advisor, diplomat, and back-channel architect. Leaked emails show Barak reporting his Russian contacts to Epstein before reporting them to Mossad. A Sequence One analyst described as legitimately insane, Epstein connected Barak to senior figures in Putin's St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, where Barak held closed-door meetings with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Putin's own foreign policy aide, Yuri Ushakov. Epstein advised Barak on how to approach Israeli intelligence. Don't go number one too quickly. Number one being code for the head of Mossad, dating from Barak's days as director of Israeli military intelligence. Together, Barak and Epstein worked to build a secret back channel between Israel and the Kremlin during the Syrian civil war, seeking Russian support for the removal of Assad while simultaneously pursuing Israeli business and weapon deals. The effort ultimately failed, but the architecture it revealed was already fully formed, a circulatory system in which Russian money, Russian people, the Russian strategic interests had been quietly pumping through the body of the Israeli state for years. By the time Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff arrived to represent the United States, the muscle in the cardiovascular system had long since fused. They did not create this arrangement. They inherited it. They served it. Jared Kushner, the true believer. Kushner's relationship with Netanyahu is not diplomatic. It's personal, religious, and lifelong. Netanyahu slept in Kushner's childhood bedroom during family visits in the early 2000s, a detail that is not metaphorical. The Kushner family fortune was used to donate millions to American Jewish institutions and Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. Kushner grew up in an Orthodox household where Netanyahu was not a news figure, but something closer to a family institution. Previous Middle East envoys at least performed the theater of peace process, speaking of two states in public while coordinating with Tel Aviv in private. Kushner does not bother with performance. His family is financially invested in the occupation. He is personally devoted to Netanyahu, and he is now, without any official government role or Senate confirmation, writing America's Gaza policy at the direction of a man who once slept in his bedroom. The post-war plan was written by Netanyahu's house guest. The structural capture is documented and public. Kushner attended key White House meetings to draft the Gaza framework. He was photographed leaving talks with Netanyahu and his New York hotel. Trump personally signed off on Kushner's initial ideas and asked him to develop the detailed post-war framework. Netanyahu validated this arrangement by inviting Kushner and Witkoff to attend the Israeli cabinet session that ratified the Gaza deal, an extraordinary gesture communicating to the world that the prime minister trusted these two men above the official apparatus of American diplomacy. Netanyahu then briefed Witkoff and Kushner on the first round of Iran nuclear talks before, not after, those talks occurred. The men who are nominally America's negotiators with Iran were receiving their strategic orientation from the Prime Minister of Israel. The deception, fake peace talks, as cover for Israeli military timing. The most damning evidence of capture comes from the Iran negotiations themselves. What appeared to be diplomacy was, by multiple first-hand accounts, a deliberate deception. Trump and Netanyahu had already begun planning a potential strike on Iran after their February 25 meeting. Netanyahu presenting Trump with 4 scenarios for an attack on Iran's nuclear program, and the two men agreeing on a path forward. The peace negotiations that followed were designed not to succeed, but to mislead. A Persian diplomat with direct knowledge of the talks later said that Witkoff conducted himself in a manner not befitting the office he represented, presenting a bogus misrepresentation of himself as a man of peace. Iranian officials came to believe that talks were a ruse designed to specifically prevent him from expecting or preparing for the surprise of June 25 talks. It's seen by the Iranians as an insult. One person with direct knowledge had said, Oman, the most trusted neutral back channel in the region, the country whose foreign minister had stalked his credibility on those negotiations, found himself isolated in Washington the day before the United States went to war. He had told CBS News just hours earlier that a deal was within reach, that Iran had agreed to never produce nuclear material for a bomb. He was wrong because he had deceived, not by Iran, but by the American envoys he had trusted. He went directly to J.D. Vance with a warning that went to the heart of the matter. America was being circumvented as a priority in favor of Israel. The Vice President of the United States received this warning from a trusted Gulf diplomat, and nothing changed. Witkoff flew to Israel and was briefed by Netanyahu directly. Then he flew to meet the Iranians. The man who briefed America's negotiator before peace talks was the same man who later said he had yearned to destroy Iran for many years, who declared triumph when the bombs finally fell. Steve Witkoff, the monetary instrument, a fortune built in the shadow of Soviet collapse. Witkoff has no ideology. What he has is money, and his money cannot be separated from the oligarchic networks of post-Soviet Russia. This is not conjecture. It is 3 decades of documented financial history. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, billions of dollars fled Russian criminal networks and oligarchs into Manhattan's luxury real estate. Mind you, real estate is mob, is money laundering. Get it. The FBI testified to Congress about this era. It is the same era in which Steve Witkoff rose to prominence in that exact market. The overlap is not coincidental, it's the foundation. The central documented link is Len Blavatnik, a billionaire whose fortune runs through a chain that includes Viktor Vesselberg, sanctioned for advancing Kremlin foreign policy, and the same man Ehud Barak, who was paid $1 million to serve. Oleg Deripaska, Putin's favorite oligarch, and the Alpha Group, principals accused of operating within Putin's system of controlled oligarchy. This isn't a distant or theoretical connection. While serving as Trump's top negotiator to end the war in Ukraine, a war that directly involves Russia, Witkoff maintained an active financial partnership with Blavatnik. Their One High Line project in New York was refinanced for $1.15 billion in 2024, while Witkoff was already serving as America's envoy to Moscow. Money, money, money. Putin's masterclass in diplomatic seduction. Putin understood exactly what he was dealing with. Moscow deliberately positioned Kirill Dmitriev, an investment banker with a Harvard MBA, married to a woman close to Putin's eldest daughter, and head of Russia's National Wealth Fund, as the point of contact for Witkoff. It was a masterclass in the manipulation of transactional mind. Appeal to a man that believes that money transcends all political difference, that every conflict is simply a deal waiting to be structured correctly. Witkoff's conduct as envoy mirrors his financial loyalties with remarkable consistency. He praised Putin as a super smart. He validated Russia's staged referendums in occupied Ukrainian territories. He referred to Ukraine as a false state. Russian state media amplified each of these remarks as evidence of American capitulation. The Russian media knows what's going on. They report the actual thing that's going on. And America gets to watch white people talk about this horse race of primaries, which is not in the Constitution. And the origins of the primary is literally based in preventing Black people from running for office as a private function and preventing Black people to vote for Black people by privately choosing white candidates to present with financial backing. The primary system is meant to keep Black people from voting. That's where we are. Think about that when you're watching white TV and they cover the primaries. They aren't including you. The leaked call. Back to Russia. Coaching the enemy. The smoking gun arrived in a leaked transcript. While traveling from Moscow to Baku, Witkoff was caught on a call with Yuri Yushakov, Putin's top foreign policy advisor. The same man Ehud Barak had contacted years earlier through Epstein's network to arrange private meetings with Putin. Epstein is the connection to Putin. The transcript shows Witkoff coaching Yushakov on how to manage Trump, advising him that Putin should call Trump before a scheduled meeting with Zelensky and that he should congratulate the president on the Israel-Hamas ceasefire and praise Trump as a man of peace. Putin made that call on October 16th. The following day, in a tense White House meeting, Trump rejected Ukrainian requests for Tomahawk missiles. Witkoff didn't blunder into this outcome. The transcript shows deliberate coordination. A man nominally representing the United States was telling Russia's senior foreign policy aide exactly what to say to the American president in order to produce a result favorable to Moscow. And then that result materialized the next day. The Oval Office, where it began, March 10, 2017, the first foreign visitors. The pattern of intelligence betrayal did not begin in 2025. It began in the first Trump term, in the Oval Office, on May 10, 2017. The very first meeting that Trump held with senior foreign officials after taking office. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Ambassador Sergei Kislyak were welcomed into the room. American press was banned. A Russian government photographer was allowed in. In that meeting, Trump disclosed classified intelligence. The information was detailed enough that Russians could identify the source and the collection method. The intelligence had been provided by Israel, the same ally whose prime minister's house guest was now at the center of American diplomacy. Senior White House officials immediately placed emergency calls to the CIA and the NSA to contain the damage. The extraction, assets burned, operatives hunted. The CIA's response was swift, secret, and alarming. The decision to extract the agency's top source inside the Russian government, a human asset described as having no equal alternative for providing direct intelligence on Putin himself, followed directly from the Oval Office meeting. Then CIA Director Mike Pompeo privately warned senior officials that too much information was coming out of the covert source. An emergency extraction was ordered and executed. American agents and assets in Russia began to surface dead or missing. The intelligence community described it as a culmination of months of mounting fear. This fear rooted not in Russian counterintelligence success, but in the conduct of the American president and the people around him. Kushner's back channel was built to circumvent American intelligence. The structural architecture enabling all this was built by Jared Kushner. Working with Michael Flynn, Kushner asked Russian Ambassador Kislyak to establish direct encrypted back channel to Moscow that would allow communication with Russian military officials entirely out of the knowledge of American intelligence agencies. The explicit purpose, as documented, was so that Flynn could speak with Russian military officials about Syria and other matters without American intelligence listening. Let that register in full. The president's son-in-law asked a foreign government to help construct a secret communication system specifically designed to prevent American intelligence from knowing what was being discussed between the Trump transition team and Russia. Have you read the Mueller report? That back channel, if successful, would have created a private wire between Kushner's orbit and Moscow, invisible to the CIA, invisible to the NSA, invisible to the American people. It was the same impulse Ehud Barak had acted on years earlier through a different intermediary, Epstein, but different overlapping purposes. The Oval Office intelligence disclosure, the burned assets, the operative hunt, and the secret back channel are not separate incidents. They're a single connected pattern, a pattern that was never adequately investigated, never resolved, and has now resumed in a second term with greater sophistication and higher stakes. Today, American soldiers are dying from Putin's intelligence. March 6th, 2026. As of today, the logical endpoint of the entire pattern has arrived and been confirmed by 5 major American news organizations simultaneously. Russia is actively providing Iran with intelligence about the locations and movements of American troops, warships, and aircraft. The targeting data is drawn from Moscow's satellite constellation. Iran's own ability to track and target American forces has been significantly degraded since the U.S.-Israeli strikes began, and Russia is compensating for that degradation in real time, enabling precision strikes that Iran could not otherwise execute. 6 service members were killed on March 1 in an Iranian drone strike on a base in Kuwait. At least 10 others have been severely wounded in operations across the region. The strikes exhibit unusual precision, hitting early warning radars and command and control nodes and patterns that suggest early external targeting assistance. Representative Michael McCall stated the situation plainly. Iran armed Russia with lethal drones to massacre Ukrainians, and now Putin is returning the favor by providing Iran with intelligence designed to help and target and kill Americans. The White House response. Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, asked about Russia helping Iran kill American soldiers, said the intelligence sharing is not making any difference with respect to military operations. She declined to say whether Trump had discussed the matter with Putin. She declined to say whether Russia would face any consequences. Asked whether the revelation had shaken Trump's faith in Putin's ability to deliver a Ukraine peace deal, she said, I think the president would say that peace is still an achievable objective with respect to the Russia-Ukraine war. There are no consequences. There will be none, because the men who sit across from Putin and Netanyahu at the negotiating table are not working for America, and the president who placed them, he has no interest in confronting the facts. In conclusion, for 50 years, Russian money and Russian people have moved through the body of the Israeli state, first as idealists, then as oligarchs, then as strategic assets, operating at the intersection of 2 nations' interests. Former Prime Minister Ehud Barak received $1 million from a Kremlin-linked oligarch on the last day of his government service. He reported his Russian contacts to Jeffrey Epstein before reporting them to Mossad. He built a back channel to Putin using a convicted sex trafficker as his intermediary. This was not an anomaly. It was the infrastructure, the cardiovascular system that had been pumping Russian money and influence through the Israeli body politic for decades. Jared Kushner entered American diplomacy as a true believer in Greater Israel. Personally devoted to Netanyahu, financially invested in the occupation, raised in a household where the Israeli prime minister was a family guest, Kushner had never pretended to represent American interests in the Middle East. He ran fake peace negotiations as cover for Israeli military timing. He is writing Americans' post-war Gaza plan with no official role, no confirmation, no oversight. He was briefed by Netanyahu before sitting across from Iranian negotiators, and those negotiations were designed to fail. Steve Witkoff entered American diplomacy as a creature of post-Soviet money. His fortune is structurally enmeshed with the networks of Putin's inner circle through 3 decades of documented real estate financing. He coached Russia's senior foreign policy aid and how to manipulate the American president. He validated Russia's annexations. He undermined Ukrainian military requests. He praised Putin in terms no American representative or any prior administration would have used. His financial partner was sanctioned by Ukraine while Witkoff was serving as America's envoy to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. In the first Trump term, classified intelligence was handed to Russian officials in the Oval Office. American covert assets were burned. An emergency extraction was ordered. A secret back channel was proposed to circumvent American intelligence entirely. None of it was resolved. In the second term, the same actors returned with more access, deeper entanglements, and less oversight than before. Oman delivered a personal warning to the Vice President of the United States that America was being circumvented. The warning was ignored. Today, Russian satellite intelligence is being used to kill American soldiers. The White House has expressed no concern, no consequences have been threatened, and no calls have been made. Kushner serves Israel's Zionism. Witkoff serves Russia's monetary power. Between them, they have handed American foreign policy to two nations simultaneously, and the infrastructure for that handover was built over 50 years, long before either man arrived. I read it a second time. I want to drive that point. Netanyahu gets Gaza, the West Bank, and the strategic architecture of Greater Israel. 40 years of yearning finally fulfilled. Putin gets Ukraine, sanctions relief, Western fracture, and the ability to go help Iran kill American soldiers without consequence. It's not his battlefield. That's how he got away with Ukraine. As long as it was not declared a war, there were no war crimes. Think about that. This is the same way Donald Trump I keep looking to the little square. Donald Trump took down the East Wall for the Epstein ballroom because if he filed for paperwork and asked for permission, people would say no, there's laws. Two powers carve up the spheres of influence while the United States provides the stage, the treasury, the blood. This isn't a failure of policy. This is not naivete or incompetence. It's a failure of sovereignty executed through two men who were never ours to begin with, operating in a space that was never truly American, funded by money that always had another destination in mind. The fact pattern has emerged. What Americans do with it now is the only question that remains. Fiend. Yeah. Yo, that's what's up. Now let me jump into the chat. I just read my whole thing. I didn't dry read it. I did dry read it. I didn't give it a run or anything like that. I did my thing. I just want to thank all the people in the chat. See who I see. First, let me just say, Talking Comics. Yeah, I'm still excited about that. You are a known quantity to me. Nikki, hello. I see Joe. I see Trish. I see Bud Jones. Misuse. I see Mandisa Mosi, Nicole. I see Diana Goodwin. I think that covers all the names. This wasn't a big adventure. I do apologize for getting the mail. Hey, that's what live is. That's what being a dude on the couch is. Because I live in a house that gets mail. You know what I'm saying? Anybody in the chat have any questions or anything they want to add? I mean, I see Miss You saying both Russia and is not real are bending us over. Well, the way I've been, I kept laughing as I'm reading this stuff because I'd be like, man, I knew it. Man, I knew it. The entire Trump administration, if you know Marvel movies, Trump is the Mandarin. Oh, absolutely. Melania is a honeypot. Well, actually, I recently got fired at work, and I'm laughing about it because what you just said, because this is written about fact patterns and trending. The fact pattern in this thing, and this is what I was talking about actually when it drew conflict at work. If you watch everybody, there's a man, there's a woman, right? There's Epstein, there's Ghislaine. In the article, I reference men who were assigned a woman who was connected. So each one of Trump's wives were brought to him. He didn't choose them. He was given the illusion of choice. Ivanka is the operative. Kushner is the connection. So in this vein, where Donald Trump's perspective is trying to bring in a king to the United States, he still has that philosophy of marrying kingdoms. Essentially, Ivanka Trump marrying Jared Kushner is marrying America and Israel because he's in the circle. He doesn't need to be in the circle. He's at Thanksgiving eating. He's at brunch. He's getting the dialogue. So the entire Trump business, that of which Ivanka was keen on the whole time, which was Russian mob, money laundering, real estate, money laundering, Russian mob. And now she's mixing with Israel. As I said at the beginning, I keep thinking about the movie Goodfellas. Ray Liotta and Joe Pesci, they're teamed together. They don't even know each other. You and you. You and you. They don't have to like each other. They don't have to be down with each other. The boss said, you too. You too. Charlie Kirk, Erica Kirk. Erica Kirk's the operative. Charlie Kirk was in tutelage. You know what I'm saying? Epstein, Ghislaine. Ghislaine was the operative. Epstein was the operative too. Epstein, Ghislaine was the operative in the sense of Israel and Russia as being connected. Robert Maxwell worked for Mossad, Ehud Barak. That's how the people in money work. Because the whole thing was, if you converted to Judaism, you could go to Israel. Dig it? If you, in a parallel parlance, if you go to confession, Father, I fucked my wife's sister, and then I shot the dog, and I feel terrible. And the priest says, say however many Hail Marys, quit being a piece of shit, yada. Homeboy walks out of confessional, feeling good. It's the same thing. You still fucked your wife's sister. You still shot the fucking dog. Somebody gave you permission to feel better about it. We aren't accepting fact patterns. You know what I'm saying? We aren't accepting fact patterns. Let me, as I am. Money isn't real. If the value of money can change between right now as I'm talking and tomorrow at this same time when I'm probably still going to be talking, it isn't real. What is real? I made some bomb chicken and vegetables last night. That is real. I ate them. I've digested them. I'm excited about the leftovers in the fridge. That's tangible. I'm an AEW fan. I'm a wrestling fan all over the place. But I'm a AEW fan now. Because just like in the United States, where money is allowed to buy everything, where everything is so compromised, the product is compromised. It's not for you. Wrestling is the fans. Wrestling is the fans. Vince McMahon could push people. If the crowd didn't want him, they wouldn't. That's how we met The Rock. Because Rocky Maivia, who was getting a push as a legacy wrestler, a legacy superstar, his father, Rocky Maivia. Rocky Johnson, that was his dad. His grandfather was Chief Peter Maivia, Chief Maivia. The territory was kind of like Hawaii. Rocky Johnson was The Rock's dad. Rocky Maivia, I'm starting to talk, so my brain's spinning. Rocky Maivia got the push with the Nation of Domination, where he and a group of black men, led by Farouk, went into the ring, and he went, and dude, he was all face, all textured hair, all smiling, all wearing cultural gear. The crowd roasted him. Ooh! He would pick up the mic. I don't even have a mic. He would pick up his mic and start saying, "Rock!" Ooh! The next time he went out. If you can't appreciate The Rock, Rocky Maivia became The Rock. He changed the crowd. Now, that was long-winded to explain why I do not like WWE now and why I do like AEW now. AEW has affordable tickets. AEW allows signs. For the longest time, I had a photograph on my Facebook, and it was a picture of I was watching the show, and I took a picture of the show where I could see my girlfriend and I standing in the ring. There was a person a few rows ahead of us, and the sign held up said, "Support women's wrestling." That's a big deal because women's wrestling right now is way more entertaining than men's wrestling. Men's wrestling, meh. Meaty meat slapping against meat. In that episode of AEW, with the sign that said women's wrestling, the two stars were Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, was going against Nikita Lyons. This was the fucking worst match I had ever seen in my fucking life, and it looked great on TV. But you had somebody who was ego by name and somebody who was ego by the size of their ass. And they didn't make any good moves in the ring until they were facing a camera that had the red light on. They didn't make any moves in the ring unless they saw the red light on the hard cam, which was facing me, which means I didn't get to see the wrestling because they were only facing the camera to do their moves. So if there were no red lights on, nothing was happening. Botched moves, shitty movements, lackadaisical running. We roasted them the whole show. There was this one guy who kept yelling, "Come on, Lyra!" the whole show. But why AEW over WWE? WWE is costing so much for trash seats, nosebleeds, costing so much to see the different shows in the different places. You have to get an ESPN thing. You have to subscribe to this channel and then this also channel. They're making it so the dude on the couch can't afford and appreciate wrestling. AEW, on the other hand, is inviting it. You may have heard the fuck ice chants during a Brody King match with MJF. MJF is always the bad guy. That's his gimmick. He's a dick. When people start liking him, he turns them off intentionally. You can cheer me. Fuck you. But why AEW over WWE? It's fan friendly. You can bring signs. The crowd chooses who gets pop time. You know what I'm saying? Wrestling should be fan oriented. If you get booed, people don't want it. The company doesn't matter. We get people crammed down our throats. A good example of that is this last year, too, with the Bloodline with Roman Reigns. In the Bloodline with Roman Reigns, people hated him because he was pushed on us. And it wasn't until he had everything taken from him that they rebuilt a storyline slowly over years. You know? But that's money versus the people. And why do I use professional wrestling as an allegory every time? Because you have the company and you have the people who are being bilked for money for what the company allows, what the company suggests, and the company will not allow. Daniel Bryan, Shawn Spears, two names that wholly got buried until they went somewhere else. AEW gives them a chance to be talented. I'm about to dip out. Money is money. Dizzy Izzy's Creative Corner. Bro, nobody wants oppression. And sticking to my personal salvation of honesty, being an American citizen in the United States of America, ruled by the U.S. Constitution, which had to be amended in order to give dignity and citizenship to human chattel, I refuse to use the German, European words to describe. But speaking of fuck ice, Dizzy Izzy. Speaking of fuck ice, nobody supports slave catchers. Nobody supports slave catchers. We need abolition in America. I don't use European words because it was America. It was America who captivated people. It was America that took, and I'm grabbing my Italian ear and this Italian nose. That's Sicilian nose. Dig it? I wasn't white. I had to fight to be white. I'm brown, brown-eyed, brown hairs. My other family are freckles and red. The Irish, the Campbells, the O'Malleys, they weren't white either. glow in the dark, somehow still not white. They had to prove their whiteness by being slave catchers, which became the police, which became this SWAT mentality that we have now. Have you noticed? I have adequately described America, contemporary America, and not referenced Europe by name, by situation. Because we're in the United States of America, where Americans were kidnapping Americans to give them back to property owners the money who were paying them to steal Americans. I didn't use any foreign words to describe that. When the White Lion arrived in America in 1619, 16, what was the project? Nikole Hannah-Jones, 1619, 1819? No, it couldn't have been 1819. 16. Anyway, math. Hannah Nikole Jones. South Carolina, Gullah Geechee, Nikole Hannah-Jones. Nikole Hannah? Nikole Hannah. My brain's spinning, and even truths are starting to sound truthy. The Black experience is the American experience. The Brown experience predates the American experience because there's a difference between the brown folks who the Europeans met along the way and mingled and mixed, and the brown folks who are here, who are native, whose lineage goes back to Pangea, marsupials, rodents. Dig it? So my essay that I wrote, because I was curious about some things, the essay that I wrote, we're using foreign terms. We're using people from foreign cultures to make decisions on our American soil. And evidence of American immigration and the problem with white people complaining about immigrants is when I'm listening to white media, what are they talking about? I'll tell you what they're talking about. They're talking about the Gestapo. They're talking about Nazis. They're talking about Hitler, concentration camps. That's their trauma. That's also the perspective that's coming into America to guide us. European trauma that immigrated at the turn of the century, 100 years ago. 100 years ago. And now we have these big dick motherfuckers in elected positions. And they're talking about being heritage Americans. Heritage Americans. And those darn immigrants, they still use the words and trauma of Europe. What about those Native Americans? What about the names of the tribes that we don't even know? The names of the tribes that we don't even know in America. Because that's not American culture. Immigrant culture colonist culture, which is fabricated and made up, is pushed on people who have nothing to do with the culture. How can you set the rules? You ain't from here. You don't even go to this school. Who you teaching? So for the last 100 years, American policy has been dictated by fakers, F-A-K-I-R-S, fakers, and frauds, dictating to us Americans who were born on American soil. 3 miles from my house is Solomon Northup's house. Like, I drive by it every day. Like, it surprised me. In the last year, I looked up and I read the sign and it said Solomon Northup's house. I was like, yo! My girlfriend's like, dude, I've told you about that millions of times. I says, but let me explain. I read Elie Mystal, Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution. Immediately after, I read the 1619 Project by Nicole Hannah-Jones. Immediately after, I read Black AF History by Michael Harriot. Immediately after, I read 12 Years a Slave. And until that man started talking about going down south, where I don't know, he talked about Kingsbury up the street. He talked about Saratoga down the road. He named names of streets in Saratoga that I have walked. Dig it? And only because I geek over things and I like to share local history, there's a church in Saratoga Springs that did not exist until it was announced that Abraham Lincoln was coming to speak. And they built this building specifically for Abraham Lincoln to speak at. I live in historical space that we don't talk about. Let me go to what Dizzy Izzy is saying and read it out loud. If you think about American English, we have so many words from the multicultural that is American words from every country, even native words, and no one realizes. Yo, we carve pumpkins. We carve pumpkins because Europeans used to carve turnips. You know? We do so many things. But I also think about, what is America? America is exploitation. When I go to a fancy restaurant, they make you pay for poverty food. And they prepare it in a way that validates. Spaghetti is poverty food. Lobster was poverty food. Tacos were poverty food. If you've ever seen the movie Ratatouille, France, fancy cuisine. This man wins over a critic by making home-cooked food. We all yearn to be broke folks. We all connect to our broke folkness. Shit. I love me some ramen. I'll daydream about ramen before I make myself go to the store and purchase it, because I have a flavor for it. I enjoy fancy mac and cheese. I remember one day, mind you, I'm getting older and me and mac and cheese don't hang anymore. I remember one day, my girlfriend was trying to impress me, and I was talking about my Grams, casserole mac and cheese. This woman goes to the store and spends $75 on cheese and noodles, and she made this Bangarang macaroni and cheese. And after I loved it, I said to her, "Don't ever spend that much money on poverty food again." Because when I long for macaroni and cheese, I want it out of the Kraft box. That's my nostalgia. You know what I mean? I'm gonna go with Nikki real quick and read this. In all aspects, I look white. I checked the white Caucasian box, but one of my great grandmothers was full Choctaw. My other great grandmother was full Cherokee. The one that was Cherokee, my great grandfather bought from the Mormon orphanage when she was just 14 years old. That's a big deal in the sense that your lineage is going back to a time where you can point to, hey, you just made me think of another great thought. Hold on. Okay. I just had to have it written down because boop, I have a quicksand brain. Um, you weren't allowed, you weren't allowed your native culture. The only way, just as the Irish, just as the Italians, they had to prove their whiteness. Right now, all the Hispanic folks who are MAGA, who are working for ICE, who are Spanish speaking nationals in their ICE uniform, they aren't allowed to speak Spanish. Essentially, Hispanic or what the native people were given the ultimatum: be white, lesser than, but act white, and we'll lump you in. Because let's admit, a lot of Europeans look like there was a lot of inbreeding going on for a lot of stuff. They didn't have a lot of diversity of culture. So back to my point that I had to write down. You hear people talk about slaves had owned slaves. You also hear about slaves, enslaved people who took the last name when they were freed, who took the last name of the plantation owner. Now, growing up white, I was led to believe it was because they held reverence for their owner. No, they were naming themselves after the plantation that they were at. So when they went to look for other people who were enslaved, who had been sold, become freedmen, they were trying to connect again by naming themselves after the plantation they came from. That'd be like me naming myself Glens Falls. So I could go meet other people with the same name as me, and we would assume that Nick Glens Falls would meet Joe Glens Falls. And we could be like, my brother. They were buying other people out of slavery, not for the purpose of having their own slaves, for the purpose of having the paperwork that nobody else could enslave this person because I own him. I own this person officially. But in reality, giving them the freedom of their existence. How does this come back to the piece that I wrote? I like to take long walks, don't I? But I wrote about what's happening right now in America. Right now, Russia, Israel, both of which have no connections to this land other than the weak man who is put in position as referenced by the Mueller report, as referenced by Jack Smith's 1 and 2. We have been getting warned. The warnings were coming from in the house. I'm going to read Nikki's real quick. My grandfather was a U.S. Territory Marshal in Oklahoma Territory who married a Choctaw woman, or so the family says they were married. I seriously doubt they were legally married because that was not really allowed in the 1800s. Common law, common law, common law. I'm writing a piece right now about Neal Cassady. Neal Cassady, and what fascinates me is counterculture. But what fascinates me about Neal Cassady is Dean Moriarty in Jack Kerouac's book On the Road. Neal Cassady is, Neal Cassady in Tom Wolfe's The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. So to me, that's part one. That's part two. As I'm reading this stuff, the 40s, the 50s, and thinking about contemporary now, there is no place in this room, in this house, where we don't have a smart device. In the 40s and 50s, as I'm listening to the adventures of Sal and Dean, and as I'm reading about the adventures of Further and the merry pranksters tooling the multitudes of the individuals that they see walking by or sitting, it was easy to get lost. I mean, folks would just pick up and go. We've gotten to a point where everything we do is observed. Everything we do is service. America has always been America, even when the people gain rights. Because we know the smart things that are brought to us. The smart TV told us our news, told us our information, told us our jokes, gave us our wit, gave us our character. We aren't now, thanks to Substack, thanks to TikTok, thanks to social media, and people will get shitty on it. But now we're starting to connect in a way where we're getting our communities back. We're talking to each other and shit ain't reconciling. We're learning that Democrats aren't Democrats. They're just a baseball team to join. You know, the baseball team. The one that goes against the Republican. The ones that cheat. The ones that sneak. But the Democrats, with their angel halo, hello, it's a work. Our government has gone from plantation owners to the gilded age of business owners. We gained some civil rights. I was born in the era of civil rights. I am a product of the first generation of civil rights given. And here we are, having to fight for them. Because my generation grew up watching the TV, telling us what our rights were. We moved on to the internet, which told us the more political, we can't do these things. We need to do things together. This is what this faction believes. This is what this faction believes, which are you. Always back to wrestling. The NWO took over WCW. And then it was the NWO versus the company. The NWO took over the company. There's still individuals in the NWO. You got the NWO red, the NWO black. You had the LWO, the Latino World Order. You had the Wolfpack. Everybody started factioning up. You dig it? That's what we are. We are not an ocean. We're a collection of drops. Right now, we're attacking Iran. And you keep hearing them saying the Kurds are going to help us. The Kurds, the conglomerate. There are as many different types of Kurd. There is many different types of Shia. There's different types of Sunni. Saying that we're going to bomb Iran. It's a designated map of land that we put a name on. That this is our boundaries. We aren't bombing Iran. The map with the name on it. We're bombing human beings. Human beings that are at school. Human beings who are in hospitals. And just like those douchebags did in Gaza, oh, my bad, I thought there was Hamas in there. Oh, my bad. They're just hiding all this nuclear fissile material in this young girl's backpack. It's all crazy. My recommendation, America Q Public, I'm speaking to you. Take the money. Take the money. If there is no money, there's no oxygen, because that's the oxygen that feeds the rich. Take the money, the imaginary money. I know I started talking about AEW earlier, and I want to fit. Yeah, Bibi Netanyahu fueled money into Hezbollah. Bibi Netanyahu organized October 7th. I want to go back to my point about AEW and WWE. While money is going into WWE, my girlfriend has 2 AEW shirts. I told her that the tangible value of those shirts is going up, because when people see her wearing an AEW shirt, they will give her, if they're a wrestling fan, they will give her the respect of choosing the team that they can afford tickets for versus choosing the team that buys up talent and keeps them under contract so other people can't use them. Hey, I've been on here for an hour and 20. I got things. I'm Nick G. I'm a dude on the couch. If you plant me, I grow. If you are going to believe in someone, why not believe in me?